So that's it. What, we some kind of suicide squad?
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Into the Snyderverse. We took a bit of a break, but we're back with 2016's Suicide Squad. We're doing it as a little bit of a ramp up into The Suicide Squad, a new movie that you might have heard of that we'll also be reviewing when it comes out. But first, we have to delve into the hells that is 2016 Suicide Squad. Thank you, Abram. If you want to
You're
see
welcome.
us maybe some more delving into hells or better movies, you should subscribe to Backlog Banter. You should like this video, give that bell, ring a ding a dong dong, ring a ding a dong dong, and join the Discord because I don't mess up speaking like that when I'm typing in Discord, talking to you, our loyal fans.
I mean, there's a lot of pressure riding on this. Let's just get that out in the front. We're reviewing the classic 2016 DCEU masterpiece, Suicide Squad, Oscar-winning film.
That's true.
Suicide Squad.
Oh,
and our thoughts on this are very important. Everyone cares about what we think about the DCEU. We've reviewed a significant portion of them, and this is where it all comes together, boys. I'm very excited.
And in case you're doubtful of the Into the Snyderverse label, this was produced by one Zack Snyder. So
not this review.
Which film?
Suicide Squad. Okay.
He's got a little prop.
No, hang on, Abram. I want you to keep that in your hand because I feel like it's obligatory that up top we do. What is this? Some sort of review of the movie Suicide Squad? Thank you, Abram. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you for setting me up for that.
All right, enough faffing about, boys. Let's get into it.
Faffing.
Yeah, fellas. How long has it been since you saw the movie Suicide Squad before we rewatched it for this?
I'd like to go first, if I may.
Okay.
And I'd also like to make a request to you, Mr. Tanner Dykstra, who's editing this video. I'd like to request that you include a Google Docs link in the description to my review of Suicide Squad that I published. The very first thing I ever published under my name, Penguins with Capes, back in 2016.
Okay.
When I saw the movie in theaters opening weekend and proclaimed that the movie was great. And since then, I've seen it several more times. I saw it at a party with a bunch of friends. I watched it with my aunt. I watched the extended edition, as I've shown that I own the Blu-ray. Believe it or not, I own the Blu-ray. And then just this morning, before we recorded the review, I watched it the fourth time.
Yeah.
I think this movie gets worse every time I see it. And what's so frustrating to me about Suicide Squad is that I really like a lot of the film conceptually. And this is kind of like if I'm like a suburban dad and my daughter is doing great in high school, she's gonna go to a great college, and all of a sudden she's on OnlyFans. Like, you fucked it up. That's how I feel about this movie. You fucked it up. You had everything going for you, and then you just took a left-hand turn into just debauchery, and you fucked it up.
Sure.
This is a great buzzword to describe this movie. I saw this movie in the most debauchable way possible. Which is with a group of probably about 15 friends for my birthday in 2016. Because this movie did come out August 5th, 2016, 2 days before my birthday. So it was perfect synergy. And it's perfect synergy. Once again, my birthday is in 3 days, and I'll be seeing the Suicide Squad for my birthday. But I remember watching that with a huge group of friends and us really remembering basically nothing about it, except for the fact that Killer Croc gets down on all fours and scurries into the water. We joked about that for years afterward. And other than that, I don't think this movie is I don't aggressively hate it, but I think it's really fucking stupid, and it gets really fucking stupider every time I think about it.
Exactly. Now, most of the time when we do these Into the Snyderverse reviews, we break the movie down by its plot points. So do we want to do a similar thing here? Because this film is just bad right off the bat, with the fact that it has like 3 different starts. It starts like 3 times. We first start by introducing the prison and Deadshot. We then get an introduction for Harley Quinn, who is also like arguably like a main character of this. And then we get an intro of Amanda Waller, who is like the controlling figure, and that's when we get the title card. So I think this movie has like 3 different beginnings,
which is why it is time to address off of the very top of this video that this is not really David Ayer's film. And as of the time that we recorded this just a couple days ago, David Ayer put out on Twitter a very long letter kind of explaining his life and how he's not going to because people keep telling him to back off of trying to get your Snyder cut made.
Mhm.
And he basically put out this letter being like, no, I've never given up. I'm not a quitter, and said in no unclear terms that this far more overtly than Snyder ever did about Justice League, as I will continue to refer to it as,
Yes.
that the studio cut of Suicide Squad is not his movie. And his cut of the film is not only more heartfelt, which we'll discuss, because he wrote this. We don't know how much of this movie he actually wrote, but the writing's fucking awful, and we're gonna get into it. But even taking on his face value, he said there's no like radio hit songs in his version. It's very different. So obviously, and we didn't need this letter to know that this movie was cut to shit and reassembled.
Yeah.
And so when I hate this movie, I'm more angling that at Warner Brothers, because a lot of these issues is this fucking awful corporate meddling that completely trashed the DCU before it even got off the ground.
Yes.
Because I like David Ayer's films. I haven't seen a ton of them, but I really like Fury. I really like End of Watch. So I believe that he's a competent filmmaker, and his version of this movie would not have been as jumbled and as big of a clusterfuck as this cut of the film is.
It's entirely possible.
I'm just imagining a world, and it's certainly possible that we eventually do get the Ayer cut of this film, and then we have 3 movies that are basically just titled Suicide Squad to fuck with, and that's gonna make it even more complicated. But I do agree with you, and I think that a lot of the problems this movie has comes down to that editing. I think it also is poorly written in sequences. There's some filmmaking things of shot composition and color and stuff that are bad. So I'm not sure that David Ayer's film would be fantastic, but it would certainly be better than this movie, which was handed off from his control to a trailer editing company, which cut it down and then shot it into theaters before it was really ready to be, released.
Actually talk. I have something to add on top of that to be more accurate to the history of this film. So there was the Ayer cut. He had some hand in editing it. There was the Trailer Park cut, which then were both shown to audiences, and they liked neither of them. So they did reshoots, combined all of that, and then put the film out.
I don't think it's a coincidence that most of this film and kind of some of the best scenes are shot in completely different locations with sometimes completely different characters. You could have filmed this, and you could have filmed this on every continent and every country in the world. No one would fucking know, because there's very little connective tissue here visually. There's so many flashbacks and cutaways and everything to probably the best parts of the movie in its current form, but it definitely lacks any sense of cohesion at all.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, specific sequences can be solid. They can talk about the characters, they can introduce them. But when it plays into the larger narrative, which is almost never, is where the movie really falls apart. And I think that's most obvious with the main villain of the film, who I forgot was even in the fucking film, which is Incubus.
Yes.
This is a character I've never heard of before, and they just decided to slap into this movie. And holy goddamn, is that the most generic like DC movies have pretty bad generic big gray guys with like horns. This is probably the worst example.
He's orange.
That's
true. Some orange in
and
there.
He's got like little venom tentacles they can shoot out.
Yeah, remember that?
Yeah.
I have a quick question for you, lads, and this pertains to the Amanda Waller intro. Do you think this team could take on Superman? That's how they're introed. Just a fun little thought experiment. Superman,
No.
do you think you guys could take the So the David Harbour explains this scenario. What if Superman were to just peel off the top of the White House and swoop and snap up the president? Do you think this Suicide Squad could take on Superman?
Well, here's what I'll say.
Okay.
I will say that Jesse Eisenberg's Lex Luthor can take on Superman by himself with his silver bullet.
That's true.
Out of Zod's like decaying skin tissue. So who knows?
Who's to say, really?
The film gives us no time to really understand how that would play out, because there are almost no sequences in this film that allow any of its characters to do anything interesting in terms of showing off their powers, which is really weird.
We get like 30 minutes of this 2-hour movie to intro our characters and get them like starting into the action. And I just, it's very straight. Who's your guys' favorite Suicide Squad character? Because none of these people are given any real characterization, but who's your guys' favorite?
Are you asking because I'm gonna start a fight? at some point in this review, but are you asking my favorite character in the film or my favorite character on the team, the Suicide Squad?
Let's do what I feel like you have things to say about both. So Abram, hit me with both your answers.
Well, my favorite character in this entire film, and I'll take this to my fucking grave and we'll discuss
Okay.
it if we have to, is Jared Leto's Joker. But my favorite member of the team is probably Deadshot because Will Smith is the only one that really tries and has any opportunity to do anything. I think
that's unfair. I think Margot Robbie tries.
Okay, maybe she tries, but she's not given anything other than she's the what has become the archetypical Harley Quinn portrayal of this ditzy kind of maybe smart and cunning, but just kind of loopy character, which I think it doesn't service her. But Deadshot, not only does Will Smith give a good performance, but he has some nice moments. I think that his stuff with his daughter is surface level, but pretty well executed. And I do think that the shot of him on top of the police car shooting all of the goo men is pretty cool when everyone else stops firing. Scott Eastwood and his other unnamed military friends all stop, and he's just killing everyone on the hood of the car. That is a cool moment. I think Deadshot's easily the best.
Yeah, I think he's far and away the most interesting character in the film, not only because Will Smith is probably the most competent actor in the entire film, but because he's the only one that's given a significant amount of attention to what his motivations are and what, he talks about his goals for if he goes through with this is what he wants, and he's always talking about how his daughter is what's fueling him, and then he has that revenge against Batman and relationships with Flag and Waller and Harley. He's the only one that feels like the connective tissue, because a lot of these characters are just bit characters, even though they're part of the core cast, which is crazy to think about. But it's a little bit awful to think that even though he is the best character, he's just kind of the mercenary character with some backstory. It's pretty generic. It's not like incredibly in depth, but he's certainly the best part.
I would say personally that I do think he could carry a film that was structured better. I whether that's a solo film or him going up against Batman or something with Deathstroke, or it's Suicide Squad and he's really centralized. I think that there was material here if it hadn't been chewed up the way it was. I think that even in a better movie, he would have been a clear highlight and not just by comparison.
Yeah. I like Captain Boomerang.
Sure.
Do you guys want to talk about the other members of the Suicide Squad? These vibrant, colorful characters like El Diablo, or who else on the team? Katana. Is she technically part of the Suicide Squad?
No,
it's very ambiguous what the team actually is, because they choose a handful of characters that are villains in jail, and they put the fucking thing in their head, and they're like, okay, go have fun.
We're doing the Suicide Squad thing.
Yes, but then also technically Rick Flag is part of the team, but he's just kind of a fucking manhandler, and then Katana just shows up with barely any introduction. And
well, Tucker, she does get a pretty stellar introduction by saying that you should get on her bad side because her sword trapped the souls of its victims.
To that point, Tucker, I have to disagree that there's anything ambiguous about this movie at all. I think that this is a very, very surface level film, as we'll talk about. So I think that the team is pretty clear. The only quasi complication is the weird way that Rick Flag becomes part of the team because he's in love with June, who happens to also be Enchantress. And then Katana is, and you might think it's ambiguous, but the truth of the matter is the entire explanation is that Katana is friends with Rick and Amanda. So she's there.
I think what I'm saying is that it's unnecessarily complicated. It's not just the characters on the Suicide Squad team. You've got examples and extra things that come in from other ways. Enchantress is supposed to be on the team, but she fucking dips and becomes a villain.
But yeah, she goes rogue and becomes the villain of it, even though they aren't sent out. It's a team built to take on metahuman threats, but instead of taking on the threat, they are assigned the task to rescue Amanda Waller. And that is their goal in the film. And then they just tertiary, let's go defeat Enchantress.
Well, they have to defeat Enchantress the second time to get Amanda Waller back again because their helicopter crashes.
Of course. How could I forget all the people who survive every single helicopter crash? Are there any deaths from the 3 helicopter crashes in this film? I don't think there are. Abram, you brought up this film is very surface level, and I feel I have to acknowledge the pop radio hits,
I'm
like you
glad
said,
I'm glad you're gonna do this. Yes.
because I think we get somewhere from 8 to 12 of them in the first half hour of this movie, which is a crazy ratio,
Right.
but they are just the worst possible picks. One that stands out to me, because a lot of the time it's like, oh, Harley Quinn doesn't want to be like this object. Let's play You Don't Own Me.
Yeah.
Sympathy for the Devil with Amanda Waller because she's secretly the bad person. We get it. But like for Killer Croc, they just choose Fortunate Son. Why? Who's to say? Not me.
The two that really fucking bothered me. First is using Kanye's black skinhead when Deadshot is
Well, hang on now. I think that is the best scene of the film, just because it's cool.
okay. It's cool.
Yeah.
But it's covered in awful dialogue. That scene is
Oh.
that sequence is a perfect encapsulation of everything I hate about this movie. You have Mark Wahlberg stand-in who's talking about, if this guy shoots me, clear my browser history.
Yeah. Classic,
And then
great joke.
And then Black Skinhead starts playing as Deadshot, just shooting targets with live ammunition. There was no plan there. That sequence is convenient. It's terribly written, and it's emblematic of how the studio fucked up the
And
movie.
again, like you said, he's just shooting targets. It's not like it's impressive that he's hitting the same spot, but Deadshot's whole thing is that he does like trick shots and stuff like that.
Yeah. He's like 30 feet away from a target, and he's got good trigger control. That's that's a sequence.
The whole thing about that character is that he can hit anything anywhere. A static target is the easiest, and they know that he can do this. It's not like, okay, let's see what he can do.
No, that's what they say. They say, let's see what he can do.
Yeah, I know, but that doesn't make any fucking sense, which I think is what Abram is saying, is why that sequence even necessary. I mean, it gets him to show off his abilities, but even then, it's the least impressive way that character could show off his abilities.
Yeah, we already saw him show it off in a more impressive way in his first character introduction, as opposed to the second character introduction.
But the worst song is when Queen starts playing.
Oh,
at the back end of the film, and I was like, I didn't remember that one.
Oh, that's big. Well, they needed to put that in because that was the trailer that got everyone finally excited for this, me included. Back in January of 2016, I believe. I think that was a comic. Well, no, it wasn't. Maybe it was a Comic-Con trailer. I don't remember. But yeah, they used Bohemian Rhapsody for that trailer, and they're like, I don't know, just put it at the end. That's what people want. They want Queen.
The problem for me is not only the fact you're using the music, but that the music is clearly thrown in over the top. So the mix sounds awful. And usually what's happening is not interesting. Shooting a music video is remarkably different. Or cutting a trailer is remarkably different from trying to sustain just a scene of a film. And to just throw trailer music or basically make a music video on top of it just feels really out of place, and it completely is a big culprit in the disjointed feeling of the film.
Yeah, and I think that also contributes to the fact that honestly the music didn't bother me at all, because I had probably never heard a lot of these songs. I mean, I'd seen the movie, but I didn't recognize the vast majority of them, and so in my mind I'm like, yeah, it's just music that they're playing during the scene. But because it's not using an original orchestral score that's working well with things that are on screen, it makes a lot of the album, particularly, it's really obnoxious, and makes a lot of this movie, which is those action sequences, just feel like they shot action sequences with these characters. It's not particularly creative, it's not particularly well put together, it's just kind of there. And I think that applies to a lot of this film. It's plot happen so you can put a movie out in theaters, and not because there's any real, ideas behind it.
I've been dreading this moment. I really have. But I don't think we can avoid it any longer. And Abram, you alluded to it a while ago. Jared Leto's Joker. Jared Leto's Joker makes his debut in this film.
Yeah.
And
the
iconic debut, the infamous debut. So Jared Leto is a bad actor. I'm going to say that, especially in this role. I think he was good early on in his career, but I think he's just really become a parody of himself. And that is nowhere more evident than in his Joker portrayal. There's a line in this where we get introduced. I think it's Harley's second character introduction because there's multiple for every character in this film. Where he utters the line, "You don't want no beef. You don't want no beef," and that is really he has multiple line beatings like that. He has this weird cadence that he uses. He's just a very uninteresting gangster Joker. The things that he does really make no sense, and they feel completely removed from the actual plot of the film. And when this movie came out, Jared Leto said, "Oh, hey, there's like an entire movie's worth of Joker stuff that got removed." And you know what? I'm happy it did. I am so happy it did because I fucking despise Jared Leto Joker. I really hate him. He has damaged written on his forehead as if we needed any nuance with a Joker portrayal. He took like the chaotic parts of Heath Ledger Joker, which everyone loved, and he's like, what if I just shit on it and made it worse? Boys, what do you think of Jared Leto Joker?
Yeah, so Tanner, I'm going to put my credibility on the line here and say that my favorite part of this film is his Joker portrayal, and I do think that he was significantly hurt by the cut of this film. I think that more than any other character or element of the Suicide Squad, that got fucked up
because Suicide Squad. Don't get them mixed up.
My bad. Because they were trying to do the Mad Love storyline. We knew that they do it in like a single sequence and a half. It was clearly a mistake. But speaking purely based on what's in the film, because I do like what's in the film, Jared Leto's hammy, campy, fucking gang-banging Joker is the closest we get to the realization of this sort of like street style, sleazy Spring Breakers-esque Suicide Squad film that we're going for. And for me, I think that the way he hams up his performance and he's got a smile on his mouth.
You want no beef? You don't want no beef?
I'm gonna hurt you real bad. That's, for me, that's the closest the movie gets to understanding that it's ridiculous. But at the same time, it has this edge to it that is interesting. I think the idea of a gang-banging Joker who is crazy in a less like manic way is interesting. I like the idea that he runs Gotham in a more overt way. He's got the clubs and he's got Harley Quinn and he's meeting with these other guys and he's manipulating them. He's got the big cars. He's driving down the streets, doesn't give a fuck. I think that's a really interesting way to portray the character. And I think that in a script that is as corny as this is, the only times that I not believed it but had fun with the material is when Jared Leto was delivering it in the way that he was. And his aesthetics are overt, but A, I think it's an interesting twist on the character. And B, I think, again, for the aesthetic and what the film is trying to be, I don't mind the tattoos. I don't mind him taking the hand tattoo and putting it over Harley's mouth. I think that this is a really good character concept that was not portrayed correctly. And I think that his performance is the only time that you can have fun with an otherwise really bad script.
You know what? I don't entirely disagree with that last statement. I had probably the most fun just cringing and laughing at how terrible he is.
Not quite what I meant, but I think we can find a common ground.
Yeah,
there.
I think we found a common ground there.
I don't have a particularly strong feelings on this Joker portrayal. I think that Abram is right. It's a twist on the character that makes this the DCEU version of the character. He obviously wasn't given enough screen time to make a lot of sense in the context of the universe thing. There's teases, there's whatever. But I think my biggest problem with the character and why, honestly, I don't think he should be in the film at all is because he adds another unnecessary layer of complication that takes away from that core cast. You've already got the Waller and Flag and their relationships, and Katana comes out of nowhere, and Incubus and fucking June Moon and Enchantress and 6 characters that don't get enough, fucking Slipknot's in there for 20 seconds. There's so much complication in this movie that adding another layer of another character that is important to the universe that doesn't impact the core plot is I think just it makes the film worse because it takes away time for what the core of the movie, the plot of the movie should have to develop. It every time it cuts to him is stuff that doesn't impact what's going on in the story of the movie with the characters that are the core cast of the film. Yeah. And I don't think his performance is fantastic. I think some of the stuff is over the top in a way that does lead to the cringe that is like self-parody in a way that takes away from the seriousness that the film is occasionally going for. But I think he just shouldn't have been in the movie because pacing wise, it makes the film less coherent. We were talking about that coherence, how it's cut together from all these different things. And if they didn't focus on the Joker for a solid amount of the runtime, they would have been able to give more time to the plot that actually matters.
I think the problem, Tucker, is that the entire appeal of the film, when it became clear that there was no artist at the helm anymore, is that, well, how are you going to sell the movie? You're going to throw Joker in it. You're going to throw Katana. You're going to put these characters and you're going to make it so Katana can have a kind of fun for 20 seconds action sequence. The only way that film is then marketable, and the only way that anyone wants to watch it, is if they can see the Joker. And frankly, the film is very transparent in that respect. It is very much okay, shit, we have to cut together material. What can we cut together? Something that has fan service, I suppose. I mean, I took out this because I bought this. I didn't need it, but I never get to do anything with it. You see the iconic costume just to see it, and there's moments like that are just really emblematic of how studio meddling completely trashed any chance of a good movie coming out of this.
Tucker, you brought up an interesting point of how Joker plays into the larger plot, because he really doesn't, even though he's supposed to.
He's there to have Harley Quinn have a relationship with the Joker, which is a thing from the comics that people know.
So the way he operates is we cut back to him multiple times, because not for Harley's introduction, but also because he's planning on extracting Harley from Midway City by deactivating her bomb. That's why he breaks into that facility or whatever. He scoops her up in the helicopter after the Suicide Squad picks up Amanda Waller. And that lasts, him getting Harley out of there lasts, 20, 30 seconds? And then Harley's on the ground again, and she gets back with the Suicide Squad like nothing ever happened. And they don't treat her any differently, even though they should. She just left them for dead. Rick Flag doesn't treat her any differently, even though the Joker just killed a bunch of his army friends. And then they have a very heartfelt conversation in a bar. And that, to me, is another great example of how just cut to shit this film is. Because, maybe there was some other thing that went down with the Joker that caused them to have that reaction to her. But from their perspective, in what happens in the movie, she leaves them for dead, basically gives them a double bird and flies off. And then they're like, oh, hey, welcome back.
I will say that I think that bar sequence is the best scene in the film. I think that's the only time when the character moments feel genuine, because I have not been explicit enough when I said the script is really bad. The Justice League script is bad because it was rewritten to add in jokes that don't land. This film has bad jokes, but it just has bad dialogue exchanges. That's the difference for me, and that's why I gotta say it. I'm more interested. Frankly, I would have traded the Snyder cut for the Ayer cut because it's very clear to look at what Snyder made and then how that got destroyed. But it's really hard to untangle everything here and see what would that movie have been, even if it ended up being a Bright or a Taxman. I never know the name of that fucking movie.
Tax Collector.
Whatever. As long as I'd like to see a more cohesive and coherent version of this, because that bar sequence is good.
No, I think it is the only time the characters have room to breathe with their interactions with one another. And while it's not particularly memorable, and it introduces some weird fuckery with okay, what are their character arcs, what are their relationships, what are their goals as a team or as individual characters, whatever. It is one of the only times where it's okay, well, let's slow down. These characters need to actually know each other to develop relationships that gets you interested in the plot of the movie. But then they get thrown right back into another action sequence as whatever, and fucking Kelly Croc screws into the goddamn thing and it starts planting bombs. I don't know. That's really the only reason he's in the movie. But
Scott Eastwood blows up the bomb. That's the other thing.
No, well, here's the thing though, is because earlier in the film, we see that Rick Flag and Enchantress plant that bomb in the subway. That when Incubus is first breaking stuff apart, they plant that bomb, but the entire important part of that scene happens over the phone while they're on the phone with Amanda Waller. We see Amanda Waller while they plant the bomb, and Enchantress runs off.
Oh, I don't remember any of this.
Yeah, I don't blame you, Tucker, because this movie is just so poorly edited and put together. There was something else that I wanted to say. Oh, the thing about another thing that doesn't have any payoff or any explanation, and I realized that my brain put a patch on this and I tricked myself into thinking they actually did explain this. Throughout the film, Rick Flag tries to get like dragged away by these bubbly men, these black tar men.
Yeah.
And your brain says, "Oh, that's because Enchantress wants like to rescue him because she's in love with him." But they never say that in the film. It just is an obstacle they have to keep overcoming. It happens like a handful of times that they're like, "Harley, he dies, we die." You know, that sort of thing.
There is a line about that towards
is
the end
there?
of the movie. But
the end of the movie.
Yeah, and it doesn't. It's revealed after the fact, which I don't think is necessarily a problem. I kind of like, why is he being dragged away? It gets a little bit cumbersome, but ultimately they do try to explain it. But they say they drag him away because Rick Flag is the one they're afraid of, which doesn't make sense. And it's also important to know that it's not because of the June connection, because June completely forfeits control of her body or her mind or anything.
Mm-hmm.
And Enchantress is like, fuck it, I'm not going to give you June back, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's not really the connection. For some reason, they're afraid of fucking
military
Trump
man McGee.
Who shows up. Which, by the way, I made a throwaway joke, but Scott Eastwood is there as Scott Eastwood. I don't even think he gets a name. I don't understand why any of those military men are there.
Yeah,
that's, Tucker, to your point about people just fucking being here to be here.
Yeah, they're fodder. They really are.
But here's the thing: the Suicide Squad is supposed to be the fodder. That's the whole point of the team.
That's a great point.
What James Gunn is doing with his movie.
Yeah,
is that the team is the fodder.
Yeah, and two of them die in this movie. Slipknot dies because he tries to escape and goes boink, and then they all forget about that. Yeah, and El Diablo has a sequence where he sacrifices himself, which is actually reasonably coherent into that character, and like him not wanting to use his powers and then having to go fucking sicko mode to defeat Incubus. But him being the only character who dies because he sacrifices himself takes away the whole weight, because you don't give a fuck about Slipknot. He doesn't get an introduction. They say, hey, he walks into a thing, he's Slipknot. This is Slipknot. He can climb anything.
And he punches someone in the
face. And then he shows up like 20 seconds later. He has a conversation with fucking Captain Boomerang, and then he dies. And it's
Captain Boomerang's like, dude, you should try to get out of here. I bet they don't even have bombs in it. I bet you could just climb out of here because you can climb anything. Then he does, and he dies.
I want to actually hammer home this for a second in a more serious way, because if you're going to cut this movie up, why leave the really trashy stuff in here? Like, there's some trashy shit that happens in this movie. Slipknot shows up and hits a woman and then gets killed. He had no reason to be in the movie. It's just weird. Yeah. There's weird racism from Griggs towards the characters at the beginning, like towards Diablo and his like fucking water tank.
Yeah.
There's just some weird shit in this movie that seems like that if you're on the cutting room floor, maybe get the random casual racism and the just woman hitting character who does nothing out of the movie. It's like, ooh, they're bad guys. Yeah, I get it, but there's nothing tasteful or revelatory about any of this stuff. It just feels trashy.
I get it. They're bad guys. Captain Boomerang robbed every bank in Australia. I get it.
Now he's playing bridge. He's playing bridge with his grandma.
Yeah.
As he says in the film.
What do you guys think about the Batfleck and Flash little cameos in this? Because Tucker said this, and I agree with him. I like it. I mean, in a better film, it would have worked a lot better, because this is sandwiched in between BVS and Justice League. This is the movie that bridges that gap.
It's the connective tissue.
Yes.
No, but I do think that it's actually really cool that they had the heroes be the cameos. That has never really happened in superhero films in general. And having Batfleck show up a couple of times and sort of be like, they're always referencing Batman because a lot of them have had interactions with him, and he's just kind of this background force. I think it's pretty cool. And the Flash thing is literally one scene or one shot, and it does feel a little bit out of place because of that. But the fact that they decided to have hero cameos, I think is a unique spin on the idea of superhero cameos. Characters like, oh, hey, I know that guy, but yeah, you do know this guy. It's the fucking Flash. That's a character everyone knows.
I agree completely. One of my favorite episodes of Batman the animated series is called Almost Got Him, where a bunch of villains are playing cards
yeah.
and retelling stories about how they almost caught the Batman. So I always find something compelling about having those hero moments show up in a villain's narrative. And I think the Flash one was only interesting at the time because we had seen Martha's the key Flash, and then nothing else. So actually seeing Ezra Miller in the costume even for a couple seconds was kind of neat. But I think the Batman ones are genuinely a little bit more interesting, like when he's going after he's on the roof of the car and then he throws on the breathalyzer and jumps down after Harley. Like that's honestly a little bit more like comics Batman than you ever get out of Batfleck elsewhere, even if it's just for a couple moments. So I do think that those again are some of the strong scenes of the film.
Strong shots occasionally.
Yeah. Yes. And it just makes me think like it really just draws attention to the how bad Warner Brothers has fumbled this franchise. Because you saying that, Abram, makes me think like, oh man, how cool would it have been if like we got more hero movies, and then maybe like Killer Croc is also like, yeah, the Batman threw me in here, and El Diablo maybe is like a Wonder Woman villain or something. I don't know, but it would have been a lot cooler if they all had those ties. But because this was the third movie in the DCEU,
yes,
it just doesn't have that. And then maybe we're supposed to like these characters on face value minus those connections, but there isn't any characterization for them.
Yeah.
It does make me happy that James Gunn is bringing back Harley Quinn, Captain Boomerang, and Rick Flag. I think he was and Amanda Waller. Yes.
Yeah.
He's bringing them back for the Suicide Squad this week coming out. Brand new movie.
I'm so excited for that movie, guys.
And it's gonna be so much better. It's gonna be so much better. And I think I read something that he wanted Will Smith back, but there were scheduling conflicts, so they did Idris Elba instead, because that's basically the same role. But yes, it is just a complete mishandling of this in a cinematic universe. It's a complete mishandling of this as an artistic vision. It's a complete mishandling this just as how a movie is written and made.
The last thing I want to say as we're kind of wrapping up here is that part of the reason that I am very disappointed by this film is that I really like the film's aesthetic a lot. I really like these designs for the characters. I don't hate the idea of like a pop and hip hop laced neon Suicide Squad movie. I think that's pretty interesting. And I like the sort of like fashionable looks of these characters. Again, it also, there's more trashy moments like Harley Quinn getting dressed, which is weird, and the copious ass shots, which are very Whedon-esque, which is uncomfortable. But
the two ways that you see Harley Quinn portrayed in like Suicide Squad versus Birds of Prey are just night and day.
Yeah,
they're night and day, and one feels a lot more in character than the other. I think that I really love Birds of Prey. I think that's a really great film, and I think that's probably the best Harley Quinn has been in the DCU. And I've heard that she's not a whole lot better in Suicide Squad, which is unfortunate. But we'll see when we review that.
Yeah,
but it just
Suicide Squad. Don't get it mixed up.
I apologize.
Oh Lord.
It's just a shame. It is what it is. It's a shame because David Ayer could have made an interesting movie, and it's a shame because I think any director who was given the freedom to could have taken this really interesting look at these characters and done something fun with them.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree with you. Is that this could have been really cool. Honestly, I was excited from the trailers. I think that pink and green sort of gradient with the dirty metal aesthetic that they have for all the logos and the trailers and the fucking key art and stuff, I think that's wonderful. I think it's got a really satisfying like grit to it. And if they had leaned more into that in the aesthetic with neon lights in the backgrounds and poppy colors and stuff, that would have sold this movie a lot more, not only from it feeling more unique, but just from a visual aesthetic standpoint. Because a lot of the scenes in this movie devolve into brown gray madness of punching and shooting, and because the movie was, in my eyes, sold as something that is a little more colorful and wacky and a grittier take on that, it's unfortunate that a lot of this movie it's entirely lacking in visual clarity and uniqueness.
Well, the reason that is, Tucker, is because that whole aesthetic was added after that trailer that I talked about, the Bohemian Rhapsody trailer, which turned it around. Before that, I think there was like a teaser trailer or something where it was just like the gray gunmetal logo, no bright colors, no anything. That's what the movie was supposed to be originally. And then people hated BVS, which had that same sort of aesthetic. Deadpool came out, which was wacky and fun. And they're like, I don't know, try to do some patchwork fixes on this. And I think just to bring it back around full circle, that is the reason why the movie fails largely, is because it's this chopped up mess Frankenstein of a film that was made by an artist in a studio and a trailer editing company, and there was reshoots.
Yeah.
And it all just, funnels down to this trash film.
The very last thing I want to say is fuck Warner Brothers. And I think that at this point, especially their handling of, they've got problems beyond the DC stuff. But between the way they fucked up this movie, the way they fucked up Zack Snyder's films, the way that they completely mistreated Ray Fisher and allowed the situation with Joss Whedon to persist, it was a level of studio meddling that I don't think we really think about anymore. And it's just really unfortunate.
Yeah. Well, there's a reason that this show is branded with the namesake of one Zack Snyder, and let's just let the creators do what they want to do. DC,
yeah,
maybe they'll have a hard reset with Flashpoint. Maybe they won't. Maybe they'll continue to shit the bed on everything. But we'll be here to cover it.
What I was gonna say is, we got Joker, and we're getting Suicide Squad, which are pretty clear artistic visions.
Oh,
so
true.
Maybe I think we move in a direction of just scrap the cinematic universe, just let creators make interesting one-off films.
Sure.
That's what I always want.
I think that's probably that's the only thing they can really do right now.
Yeah.
But regardless, like I said, we'll be here to cover all of it. DC, Marvel, what have you, video games. Subscribe to Backlog Banter, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching, everyone.
It feels good to be bad, as the box says. Do you think that was referring to the meta quality of the film?
Yes.